Welcome to When Life Gets Tough, a podcast that tackles timely and relevant mental health topics in an easy to understand way for all. I'm your host, Katie Curtis. I'd like to start today with a brief note. Today's episode may contain content surrounding suicide. If you feel like these conversations might be a trigger for you, please use discretion when listening. And as always, our counselors are available 24/7 if you're having thoughts of suicide or need support. The crisis line can be reached at 319-362-2174 or simply call or text 988. Today we have Kara Graft with Four Oaks. Kara is the education liaison. She's also a trainer with the Institute of Restorative Practices, and she's a certified Hatha yoga, mindfulness, and meditation teacher. Welcome, Kara. Thanks for coming.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's so good to see you. So, a little side note, Kara and I go way back. We worked together at Four Oaks several years ago, and Kara actually led a yoga class for some Four Oaks employees every week, and it was one of my favorite things that we did. It was so awesome.
I think it was one of my favorite parts of the week, too.
We all looked forward to that hour we had together. So first, for the people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and some of the experiences that you have?
You bet. So my name is Kara Graft, and my background, I graduated from the University of Iowa, and I graduated with a degree in therapeutic recreation. I was deeply passionate about mental and behavioral health, and so that's kind of the direction that I went. And with my education, too, I was really passionate about the idea of people finding purpose through play and recreation and just really kind of engaging fully in their lives. And so that led me to working with individuals with mental and behavioral health diagnosis and inpatient and community-based settings, which I loved. And now I'm in education. And so trying to bring that information to educators and our school systems and really thinking about meeting the needs of individuals that have experienced trauma or higher levels of adversity and equipping the adults to know how to best support them.
That's great. So I'm curious if you think about, the degree that you have and the route that you went, are you kind of living through your mission? Are you doing what you had envisioned back when you were at school at the University of Iowa?
Yeah, I think so. What I'm able to do is really take the passion that I have for movement and activity and finding purpose in life and infuse that in, the education system and hopefully the interactions that I have with educators. And really it's just helping people feel like they have the skills to bring themselves fully to what they're doing and to share that with kids. I mean, kids will grow up and model what they see from the adults that are around them. And I do feel like there's parts of like my yoga training and my mindfulness training that I get to bring to educators in my work every day, which is really cool.
Yeah, you have such a well-rounded resume that really can be integrated into your role in so many ways. So, January, new year, new me, lots of people are thinking about how can I take better care of myself? That's really where we want our focus to lie today is thinking about, how can we bring our best self forward? But I don't think we can do that until we think about, the things that are maybe hindering our care. So I'm wondering if you could tell they should be paying better attention to their self-care.
Yeah, I am so appreciative of this conversation because I think specifically after the last couple of years, we have been in this state of just stress and overwhelm. And we have become used to that's how we should feel, and we can really feel a different way. And so when I think about the idea of overwhelm, it can look different for other people, but it's responding to things in a different way than we're used to. So that might be being really irritable or lack of interest or joy in things that we normally find interest in, a sense of dread, or it's just that kind of feeling of things being a little bit too much. Burnout, on the other hand, is just really, it's a step beyond that. It's too emotionally exhausted or checked out to do anything about it. And so that's pretty serious, and that's not a place that we want people to be in. And so bringing attention to that, to have the self-awareness, to know where we're at, and to have an idea of what do I do when I notice that I'm not being my best self, or I'm not engaging with life the way that I usually have or want to.
What kind of questions can people ask themselves or sit and reflect on to acknowledge or understand maybe where they're at?
So I use a really great app, and this is one that I use the work of Dr. Mark Brackett. He wrote the book Permission to Feel, and there's an app out there. It's called the How We Feel app, and it's a mood tracker. So I have mine set for 3 times a day, and it'll give me a notification just to check in. And so it has these 4 quadrants, and they're ranked from pleasurable to not pleasurable to low energy to high energy. And it's not naming emotions in a way that is coming from a judgmental place. It's naming them in a way that's saying, I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to notice where I'm at. And so I'll do a check-in. And so if I did a check-in before this, I might have checked in as nervous or excited. And I do that 3 times a day. And then I can look back at my analysis and it'll show how often I'm in every area. And so if it looks like I'm in a low energy and low pleasantness state a lot, that's going to cue me to say, I wonder what's going on. Maybe I need to talk with someone about this, or what could I do to move myself into a place where, I do have more energy or I'm experiencing more pleasant emotions during my day. So that for me has been really helpful because it gives a picture, whereas it's not me just going by my emotions and making assumptions on how I am.
The other thing I like about that is I imagine it can be helpful if you have big tasks or projects, if you know you're low energy from, just project managing yourself even.
Yeah, 100%. And with this app, again, it's the mood meter. Dr. Mark Brackett with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. But we do this with a lot of school districts. We encourage them to do this with students and kids, so they develop that like emotional awareness and even the vocabulary. But what's cool about this app too is, just like you were saying, let's say I'm checking in as low pleasantness and low energy. It will cue you. It'll give you a suggested activity. So if you want to raise your pleasantness or your energy, here's a 2-minute meditation you could do, or here's a 1-minute mantra or something. So you're not left with, oh, I have this emotion, I don't know what to do with it. It gives you cues or guidelines on, if you want to move from that, here are some suggestions.
I cannot wait to get done with
really,
this
really
podcast
cool.
and download that. Can you, that was such a great suggestion. Can you share other practical tips that people can use, to manage their own mental and emotional well-being?
Sure. The things that you hear about most often, you hear about them for a reason. It's because they work. So, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but it's things like sleep, good nutrition, being around people that make you feel good about yourself, moving your body. I think sometimes we think, okay, I have to work out for an hour in a day and that's what's going to help me. But really it's not. Studies show if you get up and move your body 5 minutes every hour, that's better for you than 1 hour workout in the morning and then sitting the rest of the day. So it feels overwhelming when we have these big goals, when really it's small things often is what I encourage myself and encourage other people to do. And one thing that I'm trying to be very intentional about this year is think about, what are we nourishing our body and our minds with? If I'm zoning out or checking out on Instagram for 20 minutes, I don't feel better after that. I'm not feeding my mind with something that's going to make me feel better. So just being really intentional about understanding what activities and how we're spending our time in ways that nourish ourselves instead of checking out. And if we are checking out, what's behind that?
I cannot wait to implement some of these strategies. I'm just so excited. I'm curious if you want to explore some of that habit stuff a little bit more with us. So, we often set goals and then we don't meet those goals and then we feel like we failed. And so we stop completely. I know that that's a pattern I see in myself, particularly as it relates to working out, for example. What can people do to make their habits more attainable? I liked your suggestion of, starting small or little bits and pieces, but I think a lot of people can use some support and feedback about habit building. Do you have any feedback for people?
I think about getting a win. If I set myself up as with a goal that is really, really big and great for me personally, that's not something I need to win the day. And so, what does it look like for me to win the day? And I just think about doing little things. If you journal every morning, then I set myself up to do that. I'm going to set my journal out the night before. I'm going to make sure my coffee is made the night before. So I don't really have any excuses until it becomes a habit. I try to take away as many possible excuses as I can come up with so that it's just easy to do it. And once you get in the routine, you'll get those feedbacks like, gosh, it feels really good to do this, or I'm super proud of myself that I didn't want to get my run in and I did it. And just, celebrating your wins. And for me anyway, it's winning the day. And women specifically, we put all sorts of pressure on ourselves to, be idealized and perfect in all of these different ways. And starting small when we're creating habits, I think is the most important thing. And when we mess up, being gracious with yourself and saying, how can I do better tomorrow?
Yeah, you're echoing a lot of the things I remember reading in Atomic Habits, like that, setting yourself up for success. If you want to work out in the morning, put your shoes out, have the water bottle ready, have the treadmill on so that you can go ahead and make that, habit as easy for yourself as possible to execute. I know that that's something my husband and I are always like, think of your future self, right?
Yeah.
So at nighttime, we're getting all of the things prepared as best we can in the evening so that the next day is just a little bit smoother for our family. And, that includes things like meal prepping, and we will pack my son's lunch ahead of time and set the coffee pot up. So all we have to do is press start in the morning, and all of those things, taking the decision-making process out of that time in the morning makes our mornings a lot smoother, I know.
It absolutely does. I read something the other day, and someone was talking about that exact thing, and they said, what can I do to be loving to, I'll say myself, but like, what can I do to be loving to tomorrow, Kara? Like, how can I do something that will be a loving gesture for tomorrow, Kara? Which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah. What are some other ideas around, or why is it important, I guess is a better question, to be proactive about taking care of yourself wholly?
The way I think about it, if you hear anybody that's struggled with mental health concern or any, big challenge, sometimes people refer to it as like a battle, their mental health battle or whatever it is. And I think the way I think about it is it's easier to right yourself if you stumble. It's harder to dig yourself and crawl out of a hole. And so doing little things to take good care of yourself, it's easier to get yourself back on track if you have things in place. Whereas getting yourself into a hole and not taking care of yourself or maintaining things, that's harder.
Yeah. The last thing I want to touch on are about misconceptions about self-care. What about people who, say, oh, I'm going to drink a glass of wine or take a bubble bath? Is it as simple as that? And if it is, what should we be doing? If not, what do we need to be considering?
Self-care has just become this term. The last couple of years, it's just become so different. And when I think of self-care, I think of doing something or engaging in something that's nourishing or feeding your soul. And that to me doesn't boil down to one activity, one time. I mean, if you have a healthy relationship with alcohol and a glass of wine helps you unwind, or you're talking with a friend or a partner, I think that's great. I think it gets to be a problem when people are using that as a way to check out or de-stress. And the real intention of self-care is doing things often so that we can widen our window of tolerance. Like, self-care should be activities that are helping us buffer the negative effects of stress and everyday life. And I don't think one bubble bath or one glass of wine is going to help increase our ability to manage stress. I think it's those little things often.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that definition. That's not something while that makes perfect sense to me, I don't think I have thought of self-care even in that way. So thinking, maybe a reflection question for anyone who's listening and for myself included, what are the multiple things I'm going to do to take care of myself, and how often am I going to be doing those things to better prepare myself for when I maybe do face adversity or something tough comes up or a stressful day at work occurs. So I really appreciate that that definition.
Well, and I've heard too, at the end of a really busy week, encouragement, by leadership or whoever it is, like do something for self-care over the weekend. But it's like, you can't, if you've been stressed and overwhelmed and denying yourself or whatever needs you have all week, there's not an amount of self-care that you can do over the weekend that's going to buffer 5 days of extreme stress, so it has to be things that are happening often and with frequency.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for offering some new definitions, new strategies, and a great agenda for people to think about as they start their new year. Kara, so good to see you. I hope that you will come back, because I think this has been really great applicable things that people can do. As always, if you or someone needs mental health support, Foundation 2 Crisis Services is here for you. We're available 24/7 every single day of the year. All of our services are free and confidential. You can call the crisis line at 319